First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
All right, let's do this. 3, 2, and 1. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Fox 12 Weather Podcast. This is episode 87. I'm going to have to start over.
That was a great start, Jeff. 3, 2, 1, go.
I got like a little granola in my throat. All right.
Weatherman, we can't allow any further delay. So stop your waiting.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Fox 12 Weather Podcast. This is episode 87. Today is Friday, February 2nd, Groundhog Day. I'm meteorologist Jeff Orgeron, joined by meteorologist Katie Suniga. Hey, Katie.
Good morning, gentlemen.
And chief meteorologist Mark Nelson. Hey, Mark.
Good morning, folks. How you doing?
Oh, I just went through a handful of hours of GDO. Good Day, Oregon.
Good Day, Oregon.
A lot of questions about how do you feel about Groundhog Day? And every time I don't know how to answer the question because I have mixed feelings.
You know what? It pays the bills.
Yeah, that's true. You're right.
Katie,
do you
have any quick thoughts about that?
I feel about Groundhog's Day like I feel about like Easter and things like that. Like it's a fun little quirky thing, but like, do I believe in the Easter Bunny? No. Do I believe the groundhog is right? No. But is it fun to play with? Sure. Have fun
Well,
with it.
we got breaking news. You guys probably don't even know this yet. I have the official, they don't call them press releases anymore because there's not as much press as there used to be. News release. Oregon Zoo, Filbert the beaver, also known as Stumptown Phil, did not see his shadow. So what do you know? The Oregon Zoo says we're going to have an early spring. Spring will come beaverly early this year.
All right. Okay.
Beaverly early. So there we go. Oh, in fact, I think I've got the graphic here. If in case you wonder what Stumptown Phil looks like, here's the there he is right there.
Look at that cute little guy.
He's pretty cute.
It said in the news release that they had to. I think they have the little messages there. By the way, if you're watching this in video form, you can see this. If you're just listening, what you're seeing is this beaver with some treats, looking over a little piece of paper, and they said they had to guide him to the stump a few times.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah.
He's
All
so
right.
confused. He's like, what are we doing?
Early spring, huh?
Yep.
Well, yesterday we ended up hitting, I think, the record 63. We
62.
broke it.
62.
Mark, I looked at the climate records this morning and it came in at 63.
What? How's that possible? Because the 6 hourly said 62.
Do a quick check while I kill time here. Double check on that. Yeah, I saw Mark. You did post about 62, and
yeah, the high says 62 at midnight as well. 10 p.m., 4 p.m., 10 p.m., and midnight.
Are you checking that climate page that you have on the climate page on your webpage?
It says 62 on the monthly one as well. Which one are you looking at?
Wait a second. I went to your weather page today. I just want to double check before.
It also says 62 on the daily climate summary at 4:42 a.m. Folks, we have a meteorological disagreement.
You're right. I apologize. 62 is the record.
And it's funny you say that because I saw another person in town tweeted or Facebooked that yesterday, and I'm like, he's looking at the 5 hourly observations. Just for the weather geeks out there, you can look at the observations. The ASOS, the weather sensor, puts out observations every 5 minutes. But those are rounded. How does it work? They're rounded first and then converted to Fahrenheit. So they can be up to a degree off. So always look at the hourly observations, and then every 6 hours you get a high and low. I'm not saying, Jeff, and
no.
Katie, you don't know that. I mean, you know this, but
we
for
know
the
that,
other people out there. Yeah.
Well, no, I love when you repeat it because it is always a little bit confusing. So they round it, and then they convert it to Fahrenheit. Yeah,
I think that's the issue. Did I get that right? Yes.
I think you did, yeah. Yeah, it's odd. But
that was actually one of the first things you told me when I started here a year ago.
Clearly, I'm fixated on that, aren't I? Yeah.
Well, it was right when we were going into that February
the cold
deal, and we were talking about cold, and we were looking at temperatures, and then it's one of the first things you taught me.
It's a Markism. It's like, don't look at those, don't post about them, don't do it.
Hourlies.
Yeah. All right, so we've got a lot on tap here. Maybe not as much as our last podcast, which ran a little heavy. So today we're going to be talking about Groundhog Day. There's obviously a dog in the background. We'll try to speak over that. Katie, go handle that dog.
I tried. I'm sorry. Do you want me to go?
Yeah, if you don't mind, yeah. So today is Groundhog Day. We're going to talk about some of the stats. Mark is going to really get into the nitty-gritty regarding that. The snowpack, boy, it's been seesawing. That's the term we're using.
Mhm.
Start of January, abysmal. Mid-January, great. And now we're heading down a not so great path, which we'll cover in a bit. We're looking at a fairly mild forecast. We're going to dive into some of the long-range outlooks, the GFS, the ensemble numbers, and we'll pull in some maps as well. California is about to get hammered by lots of rain, mountain snow, the potential for flooding. So we're gonna talk about that toward the end of the podcast, and then we have a term of the week, which is very related to one of our subjects on this podcast today. So there we go. We have a hairy rodent. Multiple views of that if you're watching the podcast here.
This is the Stumptown Phil, the local one, and of course this is Punxsutawney Phil this morning. And apparently, he also forecast an early spring. So how did this get started? First, the more recent is that the Groundhog Day. It started back in 1887. The actual Punxsutawney Phil thing in Pennsylvania originally was held with a badger. Then they went to the groundhog. You've seen this where all the guys stand up there with their, aren't they, kind of black tie sort of things, and they hold up that poor animal February 2nd of each year. But this actually goes much farther back in time. I've got the stuff here. This is actually related to astronomy. So it's actually Groundhog Day is the halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So in astronomical terms, it's one of the 8 major seasonal subdivisions of every year. There are a few people out there, even within our local weather geek community, that are like big into this seasonality stuff. So the 8 big days, of course, we've got the March and the September equinoxes, right? The sun is halfway up to its summer, halfway down to its winter position. 2 equinoxes, that's 2. You've got 2 solstices, that's in December and June. But then, of course, between each of those, you'd have the halfway point. They're also called the cross-quarter days. So the 4 cross-quarter days, if we would just do calendar-wise, it's Groundhog Day, February 2nd. So the sun is halfway up to the spring equinox. May Day is halfway between the equinox and the summer solstice. I didn't know about this one. Lammas? Lammas. Oh, you have heard of it. August 1st. Yeah, usually we're busy in midsummer. We don't even think about it. And then Halloween is the other cross-quarter day. So all this kind of goes together. We have a long history, humanity of like kind of watching the sun. And so the way it ended up with the Groundhog Day, the Celts called the holiday Brigantia after the Celtic female deity of light, reminding them that the sun was halfway up to its journey to the spring equinox this day. And then later, the Christian church called the holiday Candlemas, referring to candles lit in the churches that day. And then German immigrants brought their Candlemas legend with them into the 1880s. Since badgers weren't around, they adopted the groundhog. And that is the end of the groundhog.
I want to know what happened with the badger. Like, why did they transition from badger to groundhog?
Probably
was it too
died.
aggressive? Oh,
I don't know. They don't live well. I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm sure they've gone through a handful of groundhogs too, right? They don't all.
Yeah.
We won't get into, that's kind of dark.
Yeah, a fun little story. So Oregon Zoo has huge different animals over the years. And this one, I remember this is a blog post from February of 2012, so 12 years ago. And they used to do hedgehog forecast. And I remember the one day they sent this press release out. And you can see the person from the zoo holding the hedgehog in the shadow. And they said the hedgehog couldn't see its shadow, so it's going to be an early spring. And I'm like, why in the picture is the kid being blinded by sunshine in his eye? Right? So I did a whole fun post about this, saying it's the biggest hoax ever perpetrated on the state of Oregon. And it was Jabari the hedgehog, which I'm pretty sure isn't around anymore. I think they lived like 3 years. And sure enough, I got an email from a witness later that day that said they were holding the hedgehog in their, like in the shade of the person. So there was no shadow. So I thought, well, how suspicious is that often that the Oregon Zoo, which is an outdoor venue, that often spring is going to come early and we're going to have nice weather coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you the reason why they don't use a hedgehog anymore? Did you shame the hedgehog and the folks supporting the hedgehog?
I don't know, but the hedgehog, pretty sure Jabari is no longer with us.
You mentioned that.
Rest in peace, R.I.P.
Another sad point in our podcast.
So is that the end of our groundhog talk? Once a year, we got to do the groundhog, or the hedgehog, or the beaver.
Tony called me Punxsutawney Forgeron this morning.
Yeah, I think we do better than those hedgehogs and groundhogs.
All right, let's talk about Snowpack, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. Start of January, we were coming off of a mild and warm, kind of rainy December. So the snowpack was in very poor shape. You can see the start of January here.
Actually, I've messed up the graphics here. So we want to talk the warmth leading into the snowpack, or should we cover snowpack first, now that I've brought this to a halt? You want to go straight to snowpack?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll start with snowpack, and then we can go back to the January numbers. Yeah. This was January 1st. Vast majority of Western Oregon was seeing less than 50% of the normal snowpack for January 1st.
Terrible.
That was a bad sign. And then, like, the miracle of the middle of the month. I mean, just absolutely jumped up to near normal or above normal snowpack across the state of Oregon. If you're listening to the podcast, January 19th, the Mount Hood area was seeing 110% of its normal snowpack. So that's just above where it should have been for January 19th.
So it went 19 to 110%. Amazing. In about 9 days.
Loads of snow. Yeah. And then here we are, February 2nd, just updated these numbers this morning. We're down to 77% of the normal snowpack in the Mount Hood area. It's kind of a reflection of, it's a good reflection of how much of Western Oregon looks. The Southeast basins are still above normal. The John Day Basin's in decent shape, but we're not picking up a lot of snow right now. We've had high snow levels as of late as we wrapped up the month of January, and no real sign of big changes coming. So, Katie, you covered this last week. We'll just briefly cover it here. Start of January was very warm. End of January, quite warm. The middle of the month, obviously, you know what happened. 4 straight days below freezing from the 13th to the 16th. When you average the highs and lows together, we ended up just below a typical January in terms of temperatures, negative or minus 1.6 degrees. So it was an eventful January. I don't think anybody can challenge that, but it wasn't a really cold January when you look at the big picture.
Look at Salem. What we're looking at here, folks, if you're just listening, we have this graphic. We don't use it all the time on air, but I like to use it in specific instances. That shows there's 30 different bars, not like the bar you go to get a drink. 30 little like bars. It's a bar graph, and each bar represents one day. This is for Salem. We have one for a bunch of cities. And the red indicates the typical high temperature. Notice how it gradually rises in January. The typical low temperature is in blue, which only goes up a little bit. But what you see is about average or a little above average through mid-month, 4 extremely cold days, 4 a little coolish days, and then bang, all the way above average. I mean, Salem had, what was that, maybe 12 days at 50, 52 or higher at the end of the month, with lows way above normal. So Salem, most areas away from the Columbia River Gorge, away from the Portland metro area, were above average for the month.
Except those tiny little days.
I mean, the final average for the month was for most areas, including north of us. In Seattle, I don't have the Seattle one here, but I was surprised. Seattle was not nearly as cold as Portland in that they, probably because they didn't have snow cover on the ground, really, I don't think. But they recovered after 2 or 3 days of really cold stuff. They were right back to normal. They didn't have that lingering east wind like we have here, which is pretty amazing because the Arctic air was deeper up there to start with at mid-month.
And, even like toward the end of January and into the first couple of days of this month, there have been times where PDX is 5-7 degrees cooler than Salem just because we have a light east wind coming out of the gorge, as opposed to that southerly breeze.
Look at the 26th and 27th. Portland 45, 48. You go to this one, it was 50s or even low 60s at the same time in Salem and anywhere in the valley south of PDX. So I think this is more representative of the entire Willamette Valley here. But this one would be more representative of anywhere close to the Columbia River. That easterly wind all winter. I mean, it happens a lot in the winter. Most of the time we don't care because it doesn't affect, whether we're going to get freezing rain or snow or ice. But it happens quite a bit that PDX will be cooler and out to Troutdale as well.
When we were doing our El Nino podcast way back in the fall.
Oh, yeah, the good old El Nino podcast.
And by the way, you can always revisit those and see how we did.
Greatest hits.
You mentioned we might have one of those winters where we have a very pesky east wind that just keeps coming back.
And that, remember guys, next podcast, I have the numbers for Troutdale for like the last 15, 18 years. Let's see how it's going. Windy, gusty east wind days. Let's see how it's ranking up there.
All right. I'm looking forward
next
to
week. That's a tease.
Yeah.
You ready for that, Katie? The east wind graphic.
Will I be here next week? There's 2 weeks coming up that I'm not available.
Well, I know I'll be here.
You can't miss that one.
I think I'm here next week after that. I'm gone. We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
All right.
Some rain. We got some rain stats here.
Yeah, we pulled these numbers at the end of the month. This is the top 10. If you're watching, if you're listening, we're going to describe it to you. This is the top 10 wettest Januaries on record at PDX, since records go back to about 1940 or so. This was the 7th wettest January that we've experienced, with 9 and 4,300 inches of rain. So it was a pretty wet one. I thought we might crack the top 5. That was kind of a debate we had last podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We did not. So, but yeah, it was, again, I don't think that people necessarily remember January 2024 for the rainfall. They'll probably remember it for the power outages and the snow. And the
I think so. I agree.
Yeah. But, still noteworthy. Any thoughts, guys?
I have one. I think somebody was on one of the local Facebook groups, one of the weather groups. Believe it or not, people get together and discuss weather days on end on a Facebook group. Katie's laughing. But somebody said, how can we have that much rain and no flooding? Well, think about it this way. Flooding is all about the duration and intensity. We could have, take this example. We could have a half inch of rain every single day for a month and have no flooding in Portland. And how much would that add up to? That would be
15 inches.
15 inches of rain, one of our wettest months ever. Yes, there'd probably be some mudslides here and there, but I mean, our rivers can handle and our creeks can handle a certain amount of rain in a certain amount of time. But if we have 3 hours of 3/10 of an inch of rain, that's almost an inch in 3 hours. And then we have the final hour is a half inch of rain. Yeah, that's going to give you flooding. Or if we have 2 inches in one day after having an inch the previous 2 days. So it's all about intensity and duration. And we can have an extremely wet winter and still have very little flooding. We've had some minor flood warnings, but the Pudding River in the valley floods a lot. So flood warnings like that usually aren't typically a big deal.
That's a good point that you bring up, because, and you're going to love this, I'm going to bring up atmospheric rivers really quick.
Oh, we got more, and we got even more atmospheric river action coming up, right?
We do, that's right. But atmospheric rivers, there's a scale kind of like the category system for a hurricane, but it's different. There's category 1 to category 5 atmospheric rivers. Category 1 being the weakest, 5 being the strongest. And it's categorized based off of the amount of moisture it carries and the duration of the event. So a Category 5 hurricane is going to bring a lot of rain over an extended period of time, whereas, you might have a Category 1 atmospheric river event, which is not bringing a lot of moisture, and, it might be a slow mover that could be over a few days. It may not be as intense. So, yeah, Mark, you bring up a good point. You can spread rain across an entire month. We might have a very wet month, but may not have a lot of flooding as a result. So, unfortunately, we are heading, and I say this unfortunately for the folks that are looking to ski and snowboard, we're heading into a pretty mild stretch of weather. For the folks that are still kind of reeling from the intense mid-January snow, ice, and down power lines and trees and stuff, I think you're going to like the forecast heading into the heart of February. So we pulled some extended outlooks. Mark's favorite, the Euro, King Euro, as Mark likes to call it.
#1 global model.
This is the temperature outlook. The extended, it goes all the way till the middle of the month, February 16th. And I think the big picture is that we hardly have any nights that are going to be dropping below freezing, if this verifies, and a lot of afternoons in the upper 40s and even the 50s, maybe some 60s.
That's the Euro. There's the GFS. And these are ensemble averages, we should point out, because, you take one operational model run, it could kind of swing all over the place from run to run. But the averages are always better. The averages really helped us during that whole lead up to the cold event.
Yeah. And so we're seeing similar conditions here. I think the lowest temperature on the ensemble outlook comes around the 10th, the 8th to the 10th, mid 40s, and so overnights, and a lot of mid to upper 30s in the overnights, maybe low 40s, and then some 50s peppered in as well.
That'd be like mid to later next week, mid to latter part of next week, I should say. And the Euro's kind of that way. This one's the Euro. Yeah, that's kind of the coolest. Notice there's an uptick there on both of them, heading towards Valentine's Day. Do you see that? Both of them.
Yeah,
what's going on?
Their temperatures.
Let me jump ahead out, and we'll come back to your other
I
graphic.
think I know what's going on.
Yeah, so I have pulled in the this morning's Euro. Yes, I'm sorry. This morning's GFS. This is just the operational run, but it represents what I think all models are showing. This is the 5-day average 500 millibar heights. 500 millibar height is about 18,000 feet in the atmosphere. So it's about halfway up through the atmosphere, more or less. And what you see is from the 5-day point forward, you see a developing ridge. I mean, this is classic El Nino with a developing ridge over southwest Canada, troughing going by through California. And this would say that that we will see drier than normal conditions and probably warmer than normal conditions mid-February, maybe into later February. But at least heading into that, let's see, Valentine's Day is on a Wednesday. So that week, Sunday the 11th through the Saturday the 17th, somewhere in there, I think we may get our first real fall spring where we see, some widespread 60s.
And who knows, maybe after that we might have some moisture streaming in from the southwest. And and models are kind of indicating that maybe toward the end of the month we could see an uptick in precipitation. There you go. Here. So perhaps some atmospheric river type of systems feeding back into the Pacific Northwest. But, Mark, I was looking at the average amount of precipitation that we pick up in the month of February, 3.68 inches. Yeah. Look at these are long range. These are the GFS and the Euro extended outlooks. This takes us, I believe, through the month of February. And man, is the Euro
most of
dry.
It.
Look at how dry the Euro is. And that's through having a hard time reading the numbers down there. That's basically through the end of the month. It keeps us below 2 inches of rain. Is that what I'm seeing correctly?
Oh, wait, I didn't realize this is the extended run that runs every night. So this is the 46-day run.
Right. Look at that.
Look at the control run. Very dry.
Super dry.
And I can add to this, I can pile on the dry train here. Look at the, and this is something I always watch closely. Look at where it has to choose a grid point, a center point, where it's going to gather this data. 10 miles to the east of PDX, this is actually
that's a wetter location.
Yeah,
wow.
So I always choose, when I do this, I do like Aurora or Salem or Hillsborough, and I always watch that grid point. So I bet that's significantly drier right now than this shows.
Man.
Well, and I just want to point out, for those that don't know, the Euro typically runs wetter than anything else. And when we were looking at the rain for this last Wednesday, I was looking at different models, and some only had 1/100th to 1/10 of an inch, and the Euro was saying we were going to get 6/10 or more of rain on Wednesday. And what we did, 2/100th of an inch. So
and we had nothing yesterday.
Yeah, so I mean, if the Euro is saying drier, I find that interesting because it's usually the bias toward more wet.
And this is the GFS extended ensemble, and this through the first 3 weeks of February keeps us below 2 inches of rain. So between the two extended outlooks, the Euro and the GFS, both are keeping us below 2 inches of rain through at least the first few weeks of February with fairly mild conditions, which tells me that is going to eat away at the snowpack. I mean, the current state of snowpack.
I agree.
I don't like the direction we're going in, at least. I mean, we could always have a miracle March, right?
And you know what? I can think of a lot of El Ninos where that has happened. Suddenly March, the split flow pattern is still kind of there, but then we get cooler systems. So yeah, don't write off. Don't scream drought yet. We'll see.
Well, and we're coming off of an extremely wet December-January period. I mean, we are in a surplus of 6 inches at PDX alone.
I was just mentioning this again on one of these weather groups that in the lower elevations, like I have a well here, so much rain. So I bet the groundwater is in great shape in Northwest Oregon and Southwest Washington. It's going to be about the snowpack, for those reservoirs and those areas east of the Cascades, Central and Eastern Oregon. So we'll see how it plays out. Look at this snowfall graphic. What we're looking at here is 24-hour snow from the Euro. This is last night's run. Basically, if there's not blue there's like almost no chance for snow. Look at that. If you take 2 inches or more. So if you take, and notice the grid point here is quite close to PDX. But if you take the next 2 weeks, which goes through the 16th, what do we have? Maybe one run in there that produces 2 inches of snow out of the 50 ensemble members in a 2-week period. So this says it ain't going to snow in the next 2 weeks, folks. I know this is poor English, but I just want to emphasize that. And I'm thinking of taking off my snow tires. As I was driving home last night, I was like, I'm tired of hearing this noise. And, they're a little more, a little more wobbly. And actually, we have a little impact thing. So I think my son and I might take mine off maybe this weekend, and that can put them back on if something shows up in late February. But yeah,
it's not. See. I don't love the direction we're heading in. I was looking at the snow depth. They're only measuring now the snow depth, or reporting it at the upper bowl of Ski Bowl, which was basically down to about 2 feet at this point. I see that bare spot up here. Do you see that in the lower camera? Lower nest cam. When I start to see that, it's like, ooh. And our upper camera is not working, but I bet we're starting to see a little bit up there. Yeah, some vegetation, perhaps.
Rocks. Don't say vegetation. No.
Sorry.
These are just the averages. And we average, it is drier on average. February on average is drier than the wettest winter months. Not as wet as November, December, or January. And March is about the same. Now, first thing I keep hearing, when I say, is this kind of the end of winter? It's pretty mild looking like we're talking about. It's been snowing a lot in late winters lately. And sure enough, 6 out of the last 10 Februaries we've had snow here in Portland.
I don't think I'll ever think of Valentine's Day any differently than I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what happened 3 years ago, 2021.
Oh, yeah, the ice storm in Salem and then the snowstorm up here.
Well, and we had our fair share of ice even up here. So there was significant coatings of ice in the metro, parts of the metro, especially
South Metro was terrible.
2 to 3 inches.
Lake Oswego,
just unbelievable. Katie, you're lucky.
Oregon City.
It was awful.
Katie, you were down there.
It from over there.
Oh, you were over there, yes. So thin layer, cold air, so much devastation from Salem northward into the South Metro.
Yeah, let's forget about that, or try to forget about it. All right, so
Katie, you haven't seen this graphic. I just did this yesterday. I'm going to use it on air tonight. In fact, I'm glad we're going to discuss this because in the graphic that's ready to go for this evening, I say, hey, listen to the podcast and we'll discuss it in detail. So we need to discuss this in detail. It's already been decided. That's what we do in TV. This just graphic says the rest of winter. What I did is I went back and I looked at these. We're in a strong El Nino, right? So very strong El Nino, actually. And so I went back and I looked at since 1950 when the detailed records have been taken, the last 9 strong El Ninos, what happened in February and March. You ready for it? Everybody ready?
Yep.
Here we go, even though it's all right there. On TV, we reveal slowly, but, this is a podcast, so here's all the info. All 9 of those were either average or much warmer than average temperatures in both February and March. I looked at the February and March temperatures separately. In fact, the last strong El Nino was our warmest ever February 2016. And 1958 was near record warm as well. March, there were a few more averages in March, which kind of goes with the, I feel like the effects of El Nino start to slip a little bit in March. Like sometimes we have wet and average Marches during El Nino. That wintertime warmth seems to go away some years. But every one of the Marches was average or near average. And in 1992, that was a near record warm March as well. So, boy, one could argue that there's a better than even chance that we have a warmer than average February and maybe March too. Thoughts on that?
It's feeling that way, but
so far,
yeah.
And then snow. Boy, this didn't surprise me that much. So if you take those 9 different strong El Ninos in the past, Portland snowfall, there was only one out of, so there would be 18 months, right? 9 Februaries, 9 Marches. 1 month out of those 18 had measurable snow. It was January of 1966. March of 1966, we had 0.6 inches.
And that was the measurable. It was hardly measurable, is what you're saying.
There were 2 traces in the other months. There weren't even traces in the vast majority of those months. I mean, the chance for late season lowland snow sure seems much lower in these strong El Nino years. So if you're thinking, wait, we've had a lot of snow late season, that's true. That's true. But those have typically been in La Nina winters where it stays cooler later into the season. And there we go, Cascade snowfall, 8 out of 9 years, below normal snowfall during those 2 months.
February and March specifically.
Yeah, I'm looking here. If we break it out by month, we had out of the Februaries, strong El Nino years, out of the 9, 1 was average and 1 was well above average. All the rest are below average.
Yikes.
March recovers a little bit. In the Marches, out of the 9 Marches, we've got one average, and 2 well above average. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 below average. So there's a better chance of better snow in March probably than February in an El Nino year like this. Yeah. Interesting stuff, huh?
Yes.
Wow, you are speechless at this research.
No,
It's research that looks like this.
It is just I'm so overwhelmed with the research. So
wait, one final point. You like how I say you have any thoughts, and I say no, I have more to say.
Yeah.
I did check one thing. A lot of people would argue, well, we're in a very cold PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, and a few of these did have a very cold Pacific Decadal Oscillation PDO in 73 and 66, and this year. One of those years was the years that we had March snowfall. That was that March of 66. So, in a nod to that, typically I'd say, it's not going to snow again. But in a nod to that one year, it's like, well, it's probably not going to snow again in Portland.
And we all know if it snows in March, it usually doesn't have as many impacts. I mean, we could have some foliage, more foliage on the trees, which could lead to more branches coming down. But it typically doesn't stick for very long if it's a light snow because of the higher sun angle. And speaking of more sunshine, here we go.
It's getting brighter. February 1st, so yesterday's sunset 5:16, we gain another, what is that, 41 minutes? Yeah, 41 minutes of evening daylight. Yeah. And then you tend to notice it in the morning. That's in the next 4 weeks. Remember, it's a leap year, folks. You got to do one more day in February this year. Those poor folks that are born on February 29th, they only get a birthday every 4 years.
I have a friend. I'm going to actually see her when I'm going to be gone later this month. I'm going to be visiting her, and she's a leap year baby.
Oh.
Does she celebrate on the 28th or 1st?
She celebrates on the 28th. We had a big discussion with her husband about it because he said it was March 1st. And she was like, no, my birthday is in February. So if there's no leap year, then I celebrate it on the 28th.
That makes sense.
So,
I was wondering about that.
That's how she goes about it. But I did want to say, non-scientifically, probably sometime this last week, I got up with my kids for getting them ready for school, and they walked out of their rooms, and they both said on the same day, "Hey, it's not pitch black." They realized they came outside and they didn't have to turn the hall light on to see, how to get downstairs. They both noticed, and they didn't know the other one said it to me when they came out of their rooms. So they're noticing, and driving to school, we have to go up a little hill to get to one of the schools, and the sun is usually right in my eyes when we get to, and so it's just starting to come up, and you can just see the tip of the sun starting to come out when we go up that hill now on our way to school. So we can tell in the mornings it's getting
and
there.
The natural life around us notices that as well. My chickens and ducks typically start laying soon. A slight increase in daylight.
Eggs soon. We get eggs soon.
Well, you won't get, probably not, because I have some old biddies in there. They're like 4 years old or so. They're starting to, ovaries are slowing down, I guess.
That's enough.
We need to get you some new chickens for your birthday.
We might.
All right, let's get into the California rain that is getting ready to, pummel the state. So between this weekend and early next week, California is set to pick up multi-inch rainfall totals, and we're talking perhaps 5 or more inches in central and southern California on the coastal areas. So this is the 5-day quantitative precipitation outlook for the United States, and what you'll notice is California is going to be the main focus. I mean, there are parts of the southeast that are going to be getting a lot of rain, but that's very typical. The bright orange shades indicate, 4 or more inches of rain up and down the Sierra. That's precipitation because, of course, it's going to be snowing up in the higher elevations and coastal California. So let's jump ahead to the next graphic. These are some of the key messages that the Weather Prediction Center has issued, and they're expecting a strong atmospheric river. We talked about a little while ago what a strong atmospheric river is. It delivers a lot of rain, and it can be an extended period of time. And they're expecting this to occur from February 4th to the 6th. Heavy mountain snow. The Sierra will likely pick up multi-foot snowfall totals. Guys, I was using our snow forecast graphic, the graph model, and I don't think we had enough colors to represent just how much snow is going to be falling up there.
Is that starting to bother you too? Because I've used that 3 days in a row, and I'm like, that red color, we need to have another color up there and change the
whole Sierra was just that dark red.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we need to adjust. Excessive rainfall will likely lead to flooding. I can think back to El Nino years in the past where areas like Malibu, Santa Barbara, the coastal areas that have hills that tend to lead to mudslides with a lot of rain falling on them, those are the areas that are going to be more prone to flash flooding and debris flows. So, I mean, it's looking ugly in terms of the forecast. And then, of course, there will probably be some strong winds and high surf. So if you have family and friends down in California, make sure that they're keeping an eye on the forecast. And if they live in any of those flood-prone areas, make sure that they're taking precautions. This is going to be a heck of an event, but they could use it. This is very helpful in the long term for the water supply, especially when the Sierra and the higher elevations in Southern California pick up snow. So,
the key message here is you better cover up the pool so too much water doesn't get in it. Right, is that a key message?
Everybody has a pool down in the Southwest. Yep. No.
Good stuff.
All right. The term of the week this week is snow water equivalent. You guys have probably seen us show the Snowpack. We showed it in the podcast. We show it on TV, the Oregon Snowpack at least. And the acronym is SWE, snow water equivalent. If either of you want to take this away, I don't want to, keep rambling, but basically the snow water equivalent is if you were to take the snow and melt it down, this would give us a better idea of how much water is contained in the snow because different snowstorms produce different types of snow. Some of it can be fluffy, some of it can be wet, some, et cetera, et cetera. So this gives us a better idea of how this could contribute to our water supply and how we may use the water resources later in the year.
This is a huge thing in the West. I mean, the whole Western USA from the Rockies westward, because we have dry summers. And so those water resource managers are they don't care about the depth. They just want to know how much water is sitting in the bank. Like when we check our checking or savings account, what do I have in the bank? Well, they are checking that's a bank of summer water sitting there ready to come down into the ground and reservoir. So that's critical. Big deal across the West. SWE.
Yeah. And it's represented in percentage. So let's say it's February 1st. We have a kind of an idea of where our snow water equivalent percentage should be or how much snow or water should be in the snowpack. And we do a comparison. So depending on if the snowpack is below normal, then we might be looking at 77% of the normal snowpack, which is roughly where we are right now. So we're not in the best shape right now. We hope those numbers are at 100% or greater heading into the springtime for multiple reasons. But that's the basics regarding snow water equivalent.
Jeff, I got to say, this is way out of off the subject matter, but you look great today with the tie on. You came to the podcast dressed up because mornings are a little bit looser, not like evenings. We're a little uptight in the evenings with our ties and nice clothing, but you look like the professor.
Today is National Wear Red Day. It's bring awareness to cardiovascular disease in women, and so unfortunately, I don't have any red suits. I don't have any red shirts, but I do have a red pin.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
And I have a reddish tie. I had a few different options, but this was probably the best one.
I've got a red one. I've got a red tie. I put it right there. I had a note to myself since the email came out, wear red when you're on the air on Friday. So I didn't wear any for the podcast, but, I just woke up.
So I wore it on Wednesday since I didn't work today.
Oh, there you go.
I wore red
Way to represent.
So everybody on Good Day Oregon was wearing red, and you'll probably see other newscasts later today with Mark and our other anchors wearing red. So it's a good cause. But guys, it was a fun podcast. Hopefully things changed regarding the forecast in terms of the snowpack, of course. But I think we could use a few mild days out there.
Enjoy it.
Yeah. And have a great weekend. It looks like it's going to be a dry one. We should have covered that, but you should already know that because you've been watching our newscasts, right? And
it still looks dry, right? Did the graph didn't come around and produce anything other than a sprinkle Saturday? We're okay.
Yeah, just an overnight sprinkle, and then it looks like snow is going to be moving up into central and eastern Oregon Sunday.
I saw that.
And then between Sunday night and Monday, the rain will start to spill over the Cascades into our western valley. So just keep in mind, Monday morning's commute will probably be a little bit wet. But yeah.
Did the NAM 3 kilometer back off?
It backed off. Yep.
Of course it did. Okay.
Yeah, that thing was for some context, that was the outlier showing some rain on Saturday, and I was kind of worried because we've been advertising a dry weekend, and I know a lot of you could use that. So Anyways, thanks for joining us for episode 87 of the Fox 12 Weather Podcast. We'll be back next week with more updates regarding your forecasts and all things weather. Talk to you soon.
You're waiting and hesitating and tell us